The Secrets We Keep. Chapter 1, The Weight of Gold. Part 2. Eleanor's grip tightened on her phone. Rain lashed against the high-arched windows, casting flickering shadows across the tall bookshelves. "Julian," she said, the name slipping past her lips before her mind could censor it. Julian Thorne looked different than he had 12 years ago. The lean, soft-spoken boy who spent his summers restoring old wooden boats down at the harbor had filled out into a broad-shouldered man with rough, calloused hands and an uncompromising air about him. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, and uncomfortably perceptive, were the same. "You remember my name?" "I'm flattered," Julian said, taking a slow step toward the central reading table. He shook off his rain-soaked coat, revealing a charcoal cable-knit sweater underneath. "Though I suppose someone in a 3,000-pound blazer doesn't usually bother keeping track of small-town carpenters." "Architect," Eleanor corrected sharply, stepping back into her familiar shell of cold professionalism. "I am an architect, Julian. And I don't care who you are trespassing on private property." Julian let out a dry, humorless laugh that echoed off the mahogany bookshelves. "Trespassing, Eleanor? Your grandfather gave me a set of keys to this place 3 years ago. When his arthritis got too bad to hold a paintbrush, I came in every evening to fix the roof, oil the floorboards, and keep the rain from destroying 500 years of literature. While you were busy building glass towers in London, someone had to keep this place standing." The words hit Eleanor like a quiet slap. She felt a heat rise to her cheeks, but she refused to break eye contact. "My grandfather is gone," she said coldly. "The legal title of this property has passed to me. Your services are no longer required." Julian stopped a few paces away from her. Up close, the faint scent of rain, pine wood, and cedar wood oil clung to him. He looked down at the handwritten note resting on the table, then up at Eleanor's tense, pale face. "So that's it?" Julian asked softly. "You drive down in the middle of a storm, sign a few papers, and sell the Starlight Library to Sterling Acquisitions." Eleanor froze. "How do you know about Sterling Acquisitions?" "Because Richard Sterling's corporate lawyers have been harassing Arthur for the last 6 months, Julian said, his eyes narrowing. "They offered him £1 million to tear this place down and turn the coastline into a luxury golf resort. Arthur told them to go to hell. He fought them until his heart gave out." "It's a crumbling building, Julian." Eleanor snapped, her voice rising above the roar of the ocean outside. "Look around you. The roof leaks, the power lines are dead, and the timber is rotting. Maintaining a white elephant like this takes hundreds of thousands of pounds, money this town doesn't have. Selling it is the only logical choice." "Logical," Julian repeated, the word dripping with irony. "That's your favorite word, isn't it? Everything is a balance sheet to you. You think value only exists if it has 6 zeros attached to it." He stepped closer, resting his hands on the edge of the heavy oak table. "This library isn't just wood and stone, Eleanor. It's the heart of Oakridge. It's where the children from the village come after school to read. It's where we run the community literacy program. It's the last piece of history this town has left after the fisheries closed down." "Then buy it yourself," Eleanor retorted, folding her arms. "If it's so precious to you, match Sterling's offer." Julian's jaw tightened. A heavy, Suffocating silence fell between them, broken only by the wind howling through the iron gates outside. "I don't have £1,000,000, Eleanor," Julian said quietly, his voice dangerously low. "And you know that. Then you have no say in what happens to it," she replied, though a sudden pang of guilt tightened her chest. She hated herself for it, but she couldn't afford weakness. Not now. Not when her entire career in London was riding on her ability to make ruthless, unemotional decisions. Julian looked at her for a long moment, a mix of disappointment and anger flickering in his amber eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a heavy brass ring holding 3 keys, and set it down heavily on the table next to Arthur's letter. "Your grandfather believed in you until his last breath," Julian said softly. "He kept every newspaper clipping about your promotions in London. He was proud of your intelligence, Eleanor. But he was terrified that you had lost your soul." Julian turned on his heel and began walking toward the heavy front doors. "Julian, wait," Eleanor said, hating the slight hesitation in her own voice. He paused at the archway, looking back over his shoulder. "Arthur left a clause in his will for a reason. He knew you'd try to run back to your cold, empty life. Read the letters in the study before you sign the contract, Eleanor. If you still want to destroy this place after that, then sell it. And live with the consequences." Without another word, Julian pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped out into the storm. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Eleanor alone in the dark, cavernous library. The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. Eleanor stood motionless beside the reading table for several minutes. Her hands were cold. The rain outside seemed to drum a steady, relentless interrogation. "Why are you here? Why are you really here?" She picked up the brass oil lamp from the table, striking a match against the side of the metal box. A tiny orange flame flickered to life, illuminating her pale reflection in the polished brass. She touched the flame to the wick, adjusted the glass chimney, and watched as a warm, golden glow spilled across the room. The harsh flashlight on her phone had made the library look like a tomb, but under the warm, amber light of the oil lamp, the room transformed. The rich grain of the mahogany, the gilded spine of thousands of antique books, and the intricate wood carvings along the balcony railings seemed to wake up from a deep sleep. Holding the lamp high, Eleanor walked slowly toward the back of the building, toward the eastern wing. Every step felt heavy, as if she were walking through deep water. Her heels clicked against the old parquet floor, echoing down the high corridors. She reached the door to her grandfather's study. It was a modest room lined with floor-to-ceiling maps, framed blueprints of old ships, and leather-bound journals. A large, dark mahogany grandfather clock stood in the corner, its pendulum frozen in time at precisely 4:15. Eleanor approached the clock. She opened the small glass door and reached inside, her fingers tracing the dusty wooden interior until they brushed against a tiny, velvet-wrapped object sitting behind the pendulum mechanism. She pulled it out. It was a small brass key, cold to the touch. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. She turned toward the massive writing desk near the window. The lower right drawer had an old-fashioned keyhole framed in tarnished brass. Eleanor knelt down in front of the desk. She placed the oil lamp on the floor beside her. Her hands were shaking so violently that it took her 3 attempts to fit the key into the lock. With a soft, metallic click, the lock gave way. Eleanor pulled the drawer open. Inside lay no financial records, no deed papers, and no legal documents. Sitting in the center of the dark velvet lining was a thick bundle of letters bound together with a faded blue silk ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age, the edges frayed. On top of the stack lay a small, black and white photograph. Eleanor picked up the photograph. It showed a young woman with laughing eyes and dark curling hair, standing on the cliffs of Oakridge, holding a newborn baby in her arms. Beside her stood a tall young man with a crooked smile and a sea captain's cap pulled low over his forehead. It was her mother, Clara, and her father, David. Eleanor stared at the picture, her breath hitching in her throat. For 12 years, she had been told and had forced herself to believe that her parents had abandoned Oakridge and died in a tragic car accident in London because her grandfather had disowned them over money. She had hated Arthur Vance for forcing her parents away. She had blamed his rigidity for their deaths. Slowly, Eleanor untied the faded blue ribbon. The top letter was dated September 14, 1995, 29 years ago. The handwriting belonged to her father. Dear Dad, if you are reading this, it means we didn't make it back from London. I know we promised to keep the truth from Eleanor until she was old enough to understand, but if something happens to us, you must tell her. The money didn't disappear because of bad investments, Dad. We didn't leave Oakridge because we wanted wealth. We left to protect the family from. A sharp, deafening crash rang out from the main hall, shattering the quiet of the night. Eleanor gasped, dropping the letter onto the floor. The sound was followed by the loud, metallic scraping of an iron crowbar against stone, and the creak of forced timber. Someone else was inside the library.